derivatives, an asset whose payoff function is a function of only some underlying asset's prices. An exotic option is any other option than standard puts and calls. That is, options with payoffs made up of calls, puts, stocks, and cash. To hedge is to immunize one's portfolio, making a trade to offset a risky asset, making it risk-free. The set of assets used to do this are hedging instruments. Static hedging. Static hedging is hedging with trades that can only be made at one fixed time, where losses or gains are realized at a later fixed time. That is, the position size of a replicating portfolio is fixed until the maturity of the option. This is in contrast to dynamic hedging, which will be the topic of the next group's video. Completeness. A set S of hedging instruments is complete if all derivative assets can be replicated with instruments in S. A zero coupon bond is a bond which pays the face value at time t. Its value is given by e to the minus r capital T minus little t, where t is the interest rate. Okay, now that we know the basic terminology, let's understand the assumptions of a financial market. Most models of financial markets follow a set of assumptions known as perfect markets. We will analyze these assumptions and relate them to the real-world pricing later in the video. The model states that there are no transaction costs or fees associated with buying or selling. Liquidity is infinite, that is, unlimited orders can be placed without impacting the price of a security. The set of hedging instruments is complete, so any derivative product can be replicated using the hedging instruments, and every asset has an arbitrage-free price. With the appropriate financial background, that brings us to the main topic of today's video. Given an arbitrary payoff function phi of some exotic option, how and can we construct a replicating portfolio? Well, the short answer is yes, we can. In perfect markets, we can construct a perfect replicating portfolio under some mild assumptions. And in real life, we can get a pretty close replication, namely a sort of discrete approximation of the perfect market portfolio. To answer this key problem, we take a detour and examine butterfly spreads. A butterfly spread with parameter epsilon consists of positions in 3 calls of the same maturity and stock. Taking a long position in calls with strikes k plus epsilon and k minus epsilon, and 2 short positions in calls at a strike price of k. The position sizes are scaled such that the total area under the payoff is 1. The payoff function of a butterfly spread is graphed in green. The initial price of a butterfly spread is a scaling factor multiplied by the prices of our 2 long positions in calls at k minus epsilon and k plus epsilon, minus twice the price of the call of our long position in our call at strike price k. Using the final price of a call option, we see that the payoff of our butterfly spread is similarly the scaled final price of the different calls. This yields the following payoff function. We're interested to see the behavior of the payoff function in the limit that the width of the butterfly spread goes to 0. That is, when epsilon goes to 0. We claim that the payoff of an infinitely narrow butterfly spread as epsilon goes to 0 is the Dirac delta function at st minus k. That is, the payoff function of an infinitely narrow butterfly spread is 1 when the final price is k and 0 otherwise. In the interest of time, we provide an animation to build intuition of this result. Note that our scaling and normalization ensures that the height of the butterfly spread's payoff is 1 in the limit. This animation is slightly limited as it doesn't explain why this is the case, but it helps to build a quick intuition. Now, let's come back to our problem. Considering an arbitrary continuous payoff function phi, we have that phi multiplied by the payoff function of the butterfly spread is a continuous function on a compact interval, since the payoff function of a butterfly spread is non-zero only in a compact interval. k minus epsilon to k plus epsilon. Hence, the product of these two is a continuous function on a compact interval and is thus bounded. By the dominated convergence theorem, we can switch the limits and the integral. We have then that the limit as epsilon goes to 0 of the integral over all possible strike prices of the payoff of a butterfly spread multiplied by phi is equal to the integral of the direct delta function at st minus k multiplied by phi. This only picks up the value of phi when the strike price is equal to k. Right? This result is really significant in that we can replicate an exotic option with payoff phi through positions in infinitely narrow butterfly spreads of all possible calls between 0 and infinity. That is, we can find a replicating portfolio. Note that under the perfect markets hypothesis, we can purchase infinite calls at every possible strikes. Well, mathematically this is great, and it shows the existence of a portfolio. But that begs the question, how do we actually find our position sizes? To figure out our replicating strategy, assume there exists some function n of k, which represents the number of calls in our portfolio at strike price k, and that our payoff function at a final price s of the stock is equal to phi assets in cash plus phi dash of naught assets in stock plus the payoff of all of our calls. This is quite a big assumption, but we'll show that a portfolio of this form actually exists. To see this, let's figure out what our call position size function n must be. Taking the second derivative of the payoff of a call option, we see that that we assumed of this form earlier, and using the fact that the second derivative of the payoff of a call function, the payoff of a call is the Dirac delta function at st equals to k, we get that the function n must actually be equal to our second derivative. Taking the integral of the second derivative of phi multiplied by the price of calls over all strikes, one can compute by integration by parts that the replication function we assumed to exist in the last slide actually exists. This leads us to the theorem about static hedging. That is, given a twice differentiable continuous function, we have a replicating portfolio of the desired form. It follows that the arbitrage-free price of a European contingent claim is given by the following. What assumptions have we made to get this theorem? We've assumed that calls of all strikes are available. That is, we have perfect liquidity. We have not made any assumption, however, on the underlying stock price distribution. This replication works in general. But in practicality, we may not have the perfect liquidity hypothesis. What if we don't have infinite money? Then we consider a discrete approximation of the replicating portfolio in the static hedging theorem. That is, for a payoff phi, which takes some values in a possible infinite region, consider the discrete approximation of the integral. And this gives us position sizes in n calls. Optimizing this gives us a way to actually construct a replicating portfolio. Note that the theory we have built is dual inputs and calls. Namely, we could make replicating portfolios with puts of all strikes instead of calls, by the put-call parity. In practice, however, one doesn't have access to calls of any arbitrary strike. The possible strikes within our payoffs range are predetermined for us by what's available in the market. This leads us to the slightly adjusted optimization problem on the weights WI, where KI are the position are the available strike prices of the calls available in the market. W-1 and W0 are the cash and stock positions respectively, and the WIs are positions in the finitely many available calls. There's another typo here. It should be W0 times S. To solve this, one can partition the range into more than n plus 2 pieces, and then we get a system of linear equations at each of the strikes. This is a set of n plus 2 linear equations in n variables, so it can be optimized by numerical methods, and one can always reach a solution since there are more equations than variables. Okay, well that's great. We can replicate portfolios using infinitely narrow butterfly spreads. But how do we price such an infinite narrow spread? By the fundamental theorem of asset pricing, under the risk-neutral pricing measure, there's a unique initial price. This is unique by the perfect markets hypothesis, since we assume that our hedging instruments were complete. So the fundamental theorem says then that the pricing measure is unique. Additionally, it says that there is a unique present price of the security, namely the discounted expectation under the risk-neutral probability measure. Taking the limit as epsilon goes to 0 of this price, since the butterfly spread is bounded, we can apply the dominated convergence theorem to switch the order of the expectation and the limit. Using our earlier result that the payoff of a butterfly spread goes to Dirac delta at st minus k when epsilon goes to 0, we get that the price of an infinitely narrow butterfly spread is the discounting rate multiplied by the transition probability of the stock having price k at time t, given an initial price of S0. Note that this doesn't uniquely price the whole process at any time t, as the transition probability of finishing at a price st, given our price at some intermediate time little t, is not unique underneath the risk-neutral probability measure. However, our initial transition probability is uniquely determined, and we can price the infinitely narrow butterfly spread. Now Xinye will present an example finding the replicating strategy of a given payoff.